Sydney.
Present.
Reeve Eman.
Present.
Councillor Sobalski. Councillor Dick.
Present.
Councillor Legree.
Present.
Councillor McDonald. Councillor McWhirter.
Present.
Mayor Sydney, we have quorum.
Thank you very much. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for the rich history.
Without a musical entourage, so we're going to have
You
to
gotta
sing.
lead.
Technical difficulties.
Peter Canty. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Very well done, council and our guests. Welcome everybody that's in the audience right now. Any declaration of interest? Councilor McWhirter.
I have a declaration of conflict. During our closed session last meeting, I declared a conflict and left the room during decision making. for certain item.
Thank you very much. On to C1, Town of Renfrew official plan review and update presented by Forbes Simon, JP2G Consultants. So we will be shifting into a public meeting. Thank you to everybody in attendance and watching online today. This special public meeting held under Section 26 of the Planning Act is declared open at 6:04 p.m. The purpose of this meeting is to introduce the official plan review to the public and to obtain public comments to be considered by consultants in the review of the official plan. At this time, I will ask staff to please confirm that the required notice was given in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act and to describe the format of the meeting. I will now turn it over to Mr. Withers.
Thank you, Mayor Sidney. Am I on? Check.
Is it green?
It is, Willie. It's on? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go with it. Okay, so yes, I can confirm that required notice has been in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. And just in regards to the format of the meeting this evening, all those present at the public meeting today will have an opportunity to speak in regards to the official plan review. Any and all comments and information submitted, whether orally or in writing, including identifying information, does become part of the public record and could be made available at any point, including on the town's website, whether electronic forms of participation, in accordance with Planning Act requirements. So just be aware of that this evening. We would like to advise that before speaking, anyone providing comments this evening is asked to clearly state their name and their address for the record, and that is a requirement. And also, if you wouldn't mind providing your contact information on the sign-in sheet at the media desk at the back of the room, that would be great. And if you could indicate if you prefer.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure being with you this evening. It's a pleasure working with you and your staff. We were very appreciative of getting the work and helping you out with your review of your official plan. It's a very exciting time for this community. It's on the verge of having a 400 series highway extended to the community, and with that brings, I think, a renewed growth pressure on the community. I've had the pleasure of working for a number of fast-moving municipalities like the Kempville area that had 416 extended to it, the Almont area that had the benefit of the 417 in the Carleton Place area. And I can tell you that if my experience in those communities is any indication of what you're about to face, it's going to be a sustained period of growth. And doing your review now, getting ready and anticipating this growth is an excellent approach and idea. And I think that this project is very well timed. That and the other studies that you have ongoing at this time, getting ready for growth. This meeting regarding the official plan update, I think is more or less a notice of commencement statement to the public. Official plan reviews are different than doing a new official plan. We're looking at tweaking provisions, making changes, reflecting the current social context of the community. And it's important that the public have an opportunity to voice their comments on that. At the beginning of the report, I'd like to preface that we're hopeful that anyone from the public that wishes to provide comments on your official plan does so by September 29th. That, Mayor and Council, is not the end of public consultation, but that's a cutoff time that we're putting for public comments so that we can prepare the issues and options report. If comments come in after that, we'll try to incorporate them into that report. But if not, they'll be captured and they'll still be reflected. We can receive comments from the public right up to the moment council passes a bylaw to change your official plan. So the idea tonight is to introduce the project to the public, to yourself, and also request comments by the end of September to be included in the issues and options report. When you do an official plan update, it is regulated under a separate section of the Planning Act, and it's got unique prescribed requirements. We're ensuring that those prescribed requirements are being met, working with your staff. As we go forward, I think that we need to appreciate what the review is required to do. The Planning Act says that municipalities, once they pass an official plan, should review it after a 10-year period, and then every 5 years after that. Historically, it was 5 years, but many municipalities push back on that, and it's now 10 years after first approved, and then every 5 years after that. There was a 10-year review of your official plan done in 2018, which is fantastic. So what we're talking about here today is the next sort of 5-year review. And the province indicates that when you do these reviews, they're intended to ensure that your official plan conforms and matches up with the provincial policy statement. Also, that you have regard for other matters of provincial interest and provincial plans, and also that it conforms to the upper tier official plan, which in this case is the Renfrew County official plan. It's worth noting that there are no provincial plans that affect this portion of Eastern Ontario. And the idea is that if we develop the update so that it make sure that you're compliant with the PPS, it's deemed at that point in time that provincial interests are being addressed. In terms of others that get involved with the process, we are in the process of sending out notice of commencement to the various government agencies. They have a role to play. Some take the role very seriously, some we don't hear from at all. I would imagine we would hear from the Ministry of Mines, we'd hear from MTO, we'll probably hear from certainly the county and others, but we do go through more or less a motions of asking them to be involved and provide any update. Most of the direction, I think, however, will come from the county. The other responsibility we have is a duty to consult with First Nations, and so we will be circulating to Algonquins of Ontario, the Métis of Ontario, and that if council wishes, we would also circulate directly to any individual First Nation community that you would like to see consulted. But I think as a minimum, AOO and Métis of Ontario should be notified. The intent is that we'll update the policies, the written text, and if necessary, we'll also be, updating the maps. And we'll be working in conjunction with Renfrew County and their GIS department to make sure the maps are updated in a timely fashion with this project. Many of you are aware that Catherine has touched base with you on a survey that we've designed for this project. The responses of that survey will be presented in the issues and options report in an aggregate form. It's not that there's going to be identifiable that we'll be able to say which councillor said what, but they're presented in a general aggregate form. And I personally find that component of the project very important and has a tremendous amount of information that we need to mine as we go forward. Mind, M-I-N-D, not mine as in mind the time. So this public meeting is as required under the Planning Act. It's a notice of commencement. We're respectfully requesting anybody that wants to have comments reflected in the issues and options report, get us comments by the end of the month. To assist with that, we have worked with staff to develop a web page on your municipal website that's dedicated to the project. It has the reports, it has statements on why we're doing this update, and will be populated with this report I'm presenting tonight, as well as other future reports. And that should be sort of a portal through which people can communicate and get information back and forth on their own time, so that they don't necessarily have to come out to an event like this. It is important to realize again that the public can put in comments at any point in time during this, and they will be considered and given consideration, but to be reflected in the issues report by the end of the month. One of the first steps that we undertook with the project was a review of your official plan against the current 2020 PPS, Provincial Policy Statement. And this is a key component of the update. And we've identified, 14, 15 areas that we feel that work needs to be done on your official plan to bring it into step with the PPS. And it's not because of lack of effort in the past, it's just because documents have been changing. And I think we can all appreciate that right now there's been more changes going on in land use planning in Ontario than I think I've ever noticed in my career. I made the statement the other day, for the first 30 years of my career, there were 2 changes to the Planning Act. In the last 5 years, there's been 5, I believe, 4 or 5. So it is a changing time, and it challenges all of us to keep up. One of the first things that's a major theme of the policy statement is the engagement with Indigenous communities and recognition of Indigenous communities and their roles and information they can provide as we move forward and plan and grow our communities. There are a number of minimums that we would recommend, but if you have a strong working relationship with First Nation communities, I would recommend that we leverage that and work with those individuals to make sure that the wording in the plan reflects the history and their areas of interest, which are typically archaeological or water-based. The water system and rivers and lakes are extremely important, as well as other natural heritage issues for First Nation communities, and of course archaeological preservation of their time on this land is important to capture as well. Climate change is an emerging issue that we're all struggling to deal with, particularly in a rural context. How do we deal with climate change when we don't have things like mass transit and things of that nature? I think there are many things that a smaller community can do. I see your act of doing some things now, and I think that the official plan should be seen as setting the stage for future actions related to climate change. Infrastructure response, in particular to stormwater, is a critical climate change issue that's identified in the PPS. The other thing that is highlighted in the provincial policy statement, and something I think the community has been experiencing but will likely experience more in the future, is infill and intensification within existing neighborhoods. Someone picking up or buying a large property that may have a single detached house on it and turning it into a larger, more intense form of residential development. That's certainly something I think you should plan for and prepare for. And also set the tone as to what is council's view about infill and intensification. How do we accommodate this, but also respect the impacts they may have on neighborhoods? And it's not an easy planning issue, but having a full comprehensive policy that talks about council's values and neighborhood values, I think, is worthwhile looking at. The other thing that the PPS got into that it hadn't in the past was this idea of economic development or economic diversification, and that official plans should speak to an economic development strategy for the community. Some communities have very clear economic development strategies that can be cropped and brought into official plans. Others, it's more an aspirational type of statement. But I would encourage you to think about the future economy of the area and the things that we need to do to make sure that your vision for how this community should grow and have jobs is reflected in the plan. Obviously, growth-related policies, looking at your land base, identifying additional lands within your future development area that should be considered sooner than later for residential development or other forms of development, I think are really important as we plan for the eventual extension of the 417. A lot of this, I think, will be reflected in the land use schedules. There may be some policy changes as we go along that we would recommend for you to think about as well. I don't have to put an exclamation mark on the issue of housing. I think it's being clearly expressed throughout the province these days that we have a need for housing, we have a need for affordable housing, and that everybody needs to work together to collectively address the issue. And there is very clear direction that what the province wants in the PPS in terms of housing. And so I think it's important that we reflect on that and put the town of Renfrew spin on it. The next point we've identified is the Renfrew County role. They are your approval authority. They need to be reflected in a more substantive way in terms of your documents that clearly recognizes the relationship and how planning approvals are achieved. Finally, another new area that was in the 2020 PPS was municipalities speaking about emergency management. I'm sure this community, like every community, has an emergency management plan. And the idea of the PPS is that the important salient points of the emergency plan get reflected in your official plan. Parks, recreation, open space, you've got pretty good policies now. You're certainly looking at your water resources and your linear systems for trails and access to the water, I think, are critical things that need to be done. We're aware that you've have other projects that have been sent out for RFP, and we're certainly looking forward to working with those successful consultants to bring their work into this document so that we can have that expansive open space and recreation system within the community. Natural hazards, the community knows all too well about your slope hazards associated with the river and clays and things of that nature, and we just have to make sure your policies reflect best-in-class type of policies to deal with hazard lands. Again, infrastructure policies could use some tweaking and improvement, particularly in the stormwater management. There's been a lot of movement forward over the last 5 years since your last review in terms of infiltration and stormwater, other best management practices with stormwater, all with the idea that it's water that climate change is really causing us to pay attention to, whether it's droughts or too much water. And stormwater management becomes a critical aspect of that. There are, I was reading last week, a municipality over on the Lake Huron shoreline that's now looking at 1 in 1,000 storm events and not 1 in 100 storm events as part of their planning process. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying we all need to start looking at these things through this climate change lens. Natural heritage policies, you have natural heritage features within your community, not to the same extent that they would in rural areas, but we do have to pay attention and make sure that those features that are significant are protected. There's also the various planning tools that we have in our toolbox as planners that your director has, that I have, that Catherine has, have been changing radically. It's almost dizzying on the issue of site plan control as one area. And capturing what is the current approach and use and function of planning tools, I think, is a key thing to make sure they're reflected clearly. Your development lands, as I say, looking at new lands, opening up new lands, looking at lands that were commercial, that could be residential, or industrial, that could be residential. Looking at the interface between sensitive land uses and industrial land uses to make sure we're developing communities that are compatible, I think, are key things we have on the list. And then finally, all the administrative changes associated with ministry names or studies or reports that are referred in your document get vetted and reviewed and make sure that they're reflecting the current references. Mayor, Council, that's more or less my report. We're certainly, again, encouraging comments from the public to be directed to your staff by the end of the month. And as we go along, the next deliverable, the next time I'll be in front of you, would be with the issues and options report, which summarizes the entire sort of review part of the project. There's the review part, and then there's the update part. And the issues and options report is the last deliverable of the review part, and it will have a very comprehensive table that identifies the issue, the PPS reference, the county reference, your current reference to the issue, and what we're recommending as a series of changes. And then you would go through that document and give us direction on those recommendations, which ones you want implemented, which ones you want more study and clarification on, or which ones you don't think are important and shouldn't be proceeding. So that will be happening hopefully later this year, October, November of this year, and you'll be getting that report. So.
Very quickly, if someone could give a little bit of a dissertation on the difference between a zoning and the OP, because sometimes people get confused and assume the OP, they're talking about changing their zoning. When they see a nice map, they want to put a yellow sticky on saying, no, I don't want that. And so 2 and 11 in terms of climate change, is it as, sorry,
yeah.
Infrastructure and
climate change, yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So will there be some pretty prescriptive policies in terms of an oversized calculation right away whenever we're putting projects together? So we take a look at the culvert and say it's 15 or 25% or it's 45%, so that we build for the future. We're putting in stormwater drains, gutters, swales.
Yeah, I think we would certainly be looking towards your public works staff on that issue and what their directions are. Many of the policies on climate change have a tendency to be aspirational. A lot of it talks about a climate change lens that you would look through. But again, I think there's some minimum policies we would be recommending, and then I think the door is wide open if you wanted to take it to next level and more robust and provide some clear direction. But again, we're going to be talking about the minimum, and if you want to go further, we're happy to go there with you. In terms of the difference between the official plan and zoning bylaw, thank you very much for that question. That legitimizes planners sometimes, that question alone, and we always are looking for that. But the official plan in a general sense is a policy document. It talks generally about how the community is going to grow and develop. The zoning bylaw is much more specific and regulatory in nature. So the official plan would look and say, in this area we're going to have residential. The zoning bylaw would say, on this property it's going to be single detached, on this property it's going to be apartments, and then on this property it's going to be a neighborhood commercial use. So the zoning bylaw is, I'd like to say, boots in the ground type of document that building inspectors use, most people in the community have some sort of knowledge of. Because it's used on a daily basis, where the official plan is more policy, direction, and typically something that gets looked at when you have development proposals coming into the community. Hopefully that answers the question. Catherine, was that okay? Eric, was that close?
I'll pass you on that. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
So Eric is used to that question, or questions like that from me. So questions 4, 5, and 14. To me, I'm a little bit worried about ring development, where the municipalities surrounding us suddenly grow, in 10 years, a whole spate of big boxes, and it drains our downtown and our Stewart Street corridor, and maybe even O'Brien Road. So is there a means of making sure that we identify packages where we can direct people coming in, that whether it's a new lumber distributor, or it's a new grocery store, or whatever it is, if there's a means of directing them to it. And then I guess I'd like to also see some kind of a very aggressive statement saying, if somebody is building on the outskirts, a large development that could drain away our business or our commercial sector, that we would be aggressive in pursuing it, or selling them water or something, to make sure that there was some kind of compensation. So I don't know how you would do that, but those are the kinds of worries I think that we should be aware of.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's 2 points there, I think.
Yep.
The economic development issue, it's an area that I've had a fair amount of experience in over my career. One of the things that I believe very firmly is that council doesn't create jobs other than within the corporation itself. So you can't have a goal that says we're out here to make more jobs in our community. What's important is that council establish a tone that's supportive of good investment into your community. And that can be reflected in your document, that can be reflected in how your staff approach developers, how you approach developers, but generally it's more of a tone that you create, that we are a community that's supportive of new investment. And I think that that's an important thing, that's reflected in here. I also think that it's critical that council, and this is more to your second point about making sure that they're coming to Renfrew, that you take the time and effort to make sure that your prime commercial, industrial, or employment lands are what I call investment ready. That someone simply has to come in and get a site plan to make that investment. There is a program under the province that's related to investment readiness. I wouldn't suggest that you have to go to that extent, but certainly the idea of making sure that this property is ready to go. You're not going to have to come and negotiate for 6 months before we can get to the point where we say this property's ready. And I think that one of my experiences from the North Grenville, Kempville area when I was down there, when the 416 came along and the community was introduced to sort of the Smart Center, Walmart type of development, is that had the community not planned for that, they would have missed an opportunity. And the other thing is, and this is more personal than anything, I believe that it's important for a community to say, this is what we want to be, this is how we want to grow, and this is how we're going to do it. As opposed to a developer coming in and saying, this is how I'm going to grow your community, right? If you've got a strong plan that talks about your vision and how you want to grow and manage growth, that will set you up for the future. Where if you've got a weak plan, the developers will start planning your community as a default. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not good.
Okay, so thank you. I have 3 more and then I'll shut up. So thank you. With that, number 6, I've had a number of meetings with modular home contractors or builders who are in the process and small and tiny homes. So I come from a rural background where, you know, someone would put a trailer, you know, a house trailer in the backyard and have their family member move in, and they would have a license for 10 years or 15, then they remove it. So is that a kind of a policy we would have? Because in some instances, the modular home folks are saying, okay, I can come up, you know, to within 5 feet of your back door, plunk this structure down, using a proper engineering term such as
Plunking, yep.
and then connect it with a breezeway or a closed-in breezeway, and then with the idea that it can be removed down the road when it's sold. So is that kind of the approach we might be looking at, or are we looking at the tiny homes and modular components that are added to an existing residence staying there forever?
That's a fantastic question, and it's something I could talk to you about all night long.
All right, we'll save it for a memo.
The Coles Notes version is yes. I think that we have to make sure that your residential policies reflect the broadest range of housing options available. I think that communities that are more restrictive have got into trouble. But I think that if you open it up and make it broader, I think that we'll be successful, certainly on the affordable housing front. The issue of tiny homes is an interesting one. I gave a paper, well, it's quite a few years ago now, but it was pre-COVID, about 6 years ago on tiny homes. And it was at an Algonquin College event. And they wanted me to speak about sort of the history and how we've got to this point. And a lot of the people in the room were my vintage, so I asked the question, you know, how many people were raised in a tiny home? And nobody said anything. And then I said, how many people were raised in a wartime home? Because that was the first tiny home. The wartime home out of World War I was about 418 square feet as the base. Out of World War II, it was closer to 680 square feet. But I would submit that the vast majority of the population has been conceived in a tiny home, right? The rest of it, I'm not sure where, maybe a Chevy somewhere. But the long and the short of it is that a lot of these modern planning issues, like tiny homes, are just old ideas with new names. And I think that we have to accommodate them, we have to reflect on them. I think they're fantastic, and I think we should be opening up and allowing this in a more substantive way. One of the ways that they're reflected is additional residential units on properties that is now prescribed in legislation to be the law of the land, and we should be ensuring that our bylaws have policies that allow for ARUs as a right on properties. 2 in a house, or 1 in an accessory and 1 in the house. Those things, again, that's a new form of development. Your policies should reflect on that. But the details of tiny homes have to be picked up in the zoning bylaw. So after you do your update of your official plan, you should be looking at updating your zoning bylaw to bring that into step, right? But I think, again, having a residential policy that is broad and does not limit housing options and choice, I think is typically the most successful path forward.
Okay, thank you. And then my final one is number 10, the natural hazard lands. Does that include our ravines, or is there a certain depth that, or slope metric that we have to be aware of? Because we own ravines where we drain into and we maintain them a little bit, and we have some slope issues.
I think that again would be something that we would work with your staff on, and the definitions and where we have information about that. But certainly where you have river ravines and steep slopes, we need to be concerned about that.
For the education.
Thank you so much. Councillor Andrew Dick.
Thank you, Mayor Sidney. Through you, Mayor Sidney, I just have kind of one little comment about Section 11. You have, tell me when you're there.
Yep.
Just at the bottom, you say there is also a benefit in looking at the policies related to road standards. So I don't know if you've drove around Renfrew, but it's pretty bad. So I was wondering if you could maybe, before you finalize this, you kind of have a better understanding of our roads. Because the way I look at it, it all steers back to everything else about expanding new houses, with the 417 coming. So you come in to Renfrew and you want to live here, but then you go to look at a house on probably 80% of our streets. The sidewalks are in despair, they're overgrown with weeds, our roads are horrible, and then they just turn right around and they're going to move to Empire or Pembroke. That's my fear. Yeah. So I'm not knocking what you've said, I just hope you could explore that a little more, because I think the state of our roads and sidewalks and the way they look and the way they drive comes back to everything that you've talked about in this report. So that's just my comment. It's just, I'm not knocking your report, I'm just saying.
Oh, no. And it's a very, very fair comment. And I should clarify that when the report speaks to road standards, it's not about the condition of your roads. I come from a township where the condition of the road is gravel, and gravel all the time, so that's my standard. But I'm more speaking about road widths and your cross-sectional profiles of what typically would be a modern street in a subdivision. One of the things that's happening right now in the industry is that developers are encouraged and told to put more on the same amount of land as they had before. So if they would have looked at 30 units, now they're looking at 50 units. To do that, they start shrinking down road standards, going to condominium roads. And there are communities in Renfrew County that are struggling with certain road standards that were reduced, and now we've got townhouse development and they don't have enough parking and everybody has a boat or an ATV, and it's hard-pressed some days to get an ambulance down a street because there's so much congestion on street parking. We have to be really, really careful about that. And again, if you establish your standards that say this is how we want a typical road in a new development to look, then you push the development industry to live by that, and you don't give them exemptions unless well justified and everybody agrees that, yeah, this makes sense in this case. But again, it's about making sure that your document is ready for growth and pressure. And one of my experiences is that in the future, if not already, your staff will be under pressure to reduce road standards, right? Which, again, your job is to build a community. Your job isn't to be a developer. They build development, but your job is building the community, looking at connectivity, looking at pedestrian travel, looking at recreation assets. Those are your jobs, and those are the things that developers don't necessarily focus on.
Thank you for the clarification on that. I
You're very
appreciate it.
welcome.
Any other questions from council? Councilor McWhorter.
Your worship, number 14, development of lands, says needs to be access to new lands opened up to meet the anticipation demand for new lands. Are you talking about our community, the town actually, we do have land that's put aside for commercial, that's out towards where the extension's going to come through?
Yep.
Are you talking about us putting in the infrastructure first and then selling the properties?
No, what I'm speaking of is looking at what is the most appropriate land use for some of these lands, right? I think that there are some commercial lands that may be better suited for residential, just based on the way the town's evolved and grown over the last 15 or 20 years. Right? And so it's taking a look and saying, okay, let's move the monopoly pieces, let's see what makes most sense, what's a future development area in your official plan that we should be thinking about opening up, and then you would have policies that say the developer is responsible for the infrastructure extensions to this property. I am a proponent of growth pays for growth. I'm not a proponent of developers getting a free ride on the backs of taxpayers. And so growth pays for growth is a theme I think I would encourage you to look at and go forward with.
Councilor Degree, do you have anything? Thank you. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak? Hearing none? Oh, sorry, yes?
I'd like to speak.
How do you want to do this?
Just have to give you a mic so it translates to YouTube.
Yeah,
For
I
viewers
can
at
move,
home.
I can step aside.
We can provide her with that. Thank you. Sorry, this doesn't come through our public speaker.
And we do need your name and address, please.
My name is Jennifer McGrath. I live at 843 Opeongo Road, Renfrew, Ontario. I'd like to speak to you tonight. We're here to address about the initiative for maybe a possible pool for our town. So I have a speech that I'd like to read to you guys. So we're here tonight to address the recreational needs for the residents of the town of Renfrew, which have been shuffled aside by numerous councils over a long period of time. Starting in 1967, it was identified that there was a need for an indoor aquatic facility. In fact, the desire was such a facility was so great that many people came forward and donated considerable funds towards the construction of an indoor aquatic facility. The project did not proceed at this time. The funds that were donated at the time are still held in trust as of today, waiting for progressive council to take the lead and build an indoor aquatic facility, which the residents of Renfrew wanted and needed. In 1984, the Parks and Recreation Committee completed a community needs assessment involving the citizens of Renfrew, and it was determined that a new arena and indoor pool were required by the citizens of Renfrew. In 1985, Renfrew Town Council authorized and conducting of an independent feasible study on the need of a new arena and an indoor pool. The study was conducted by a Toronto firm called the Institute of Environment Research. At the conclusion of the study, it was confirmed that there was a need for both facilities as determined by the citizens of Renfrew. As well, when the citizens were asked if the town could only afford one built facility, what would they build? A resounding 80% said that the town should build an indoor aquatic facility. The cost of this study was $25,000. In 1987, Town Council indicated that they would prepared to build an arena and pool facility, provided a Ontario grant in the amount of $800,000 was obtained, and the community raised $100,000 towards the cost of the project. In 9 months, the grant was obtained and raised for the project. In turn, Town Council decided to add a community hall to the project, which left the project with a $500,000 shortfall in financing. As a result, council decided to build the Arena Hall complex, which opened in 1989 and promised to build an aquatic facility in 1992, a promise which was not kept by the kept to the residents of Renfrew. The present Mattaway Activity Center is a beautiful facility and serves 10% of our population with ice-related activities. 80% of our population needs for aquatic facility have not been served. During the interviewing years since 1989, 5 community needs assessments were carried out by the Parks and Recreation Committee to establish recreational priorities for numerous 5-year period. As the result of these assessments showed that 70 to 80% of residents considered an indoor aquatic facility was their #1 priority for recreational services. In 2011, the town of Renfrew comprised the firm of Pellot and Associates to conduct an independent master plan study for the Parks and Recreations Department at a cost of $60,000. This master plan study showed that the residents of Renfrew, by a margin of 80%, still required an indoor aquatic facility. The next closest facility requirement was a second ice pad, which received 20% support. Presently, we are aware that there is $155,000 from the 1967 fundraising effort still in a market fund from our indoor aquatic facility, which is controlled by members of our community. As well, we are aware that there is another $34,000 sitting in a fund controlled by the town of Renfrew, which is earmarked for a swimming pool facility. This was left to the town from the 1997 fundraising efforts. Also, the late Jane Wilson donated $331,000 to the town for the development of a municipal swimming pool. So in total, there's $520,000 waiting to be put into an aquatic facility development. We, as an ad hoc aquatic facility committee, feel it is long overdue for the town council to show some leadership and establish a plan for the construction of an indoor aquatic facility. There is considerable funds available to start this project, and we are sure that the community will respond favorably if you were to make an indoor aquatic facility a major project for residents of Renfrew. What it takes is leadership, planning, both architectural and financial, and a commitment to meet our needs. The citizens of the town of Renfrew are waiting for you, their council, to show some leadership and bring an aquatic facility to reality. We are tired of waiting. We are tired of being put off for another recreational project, and we are tired of the lack of leadership in the area of our greatest need. We need action now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments from the public? Hearing none. Review.
Is it possible to get a copy of that?
Can we get a copy of that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mayor, anybody that wants to have comments like that, I really encourage them to submit them.
Yep.
But have them in writing so that we can capture the essence properly.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you. No other comments from the public? Wonderful. So at this time, I will declare the public meeting closed at 6:53. I want to thank staff and the consultants and the members of the public for their participation in this important project. Please stay tuned to the town's website and the Zen City Engagement Project page for ongoing notices and updates. I want to thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to your reports.
It was a pleasure being before you. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. On to C2. Friends of the Caboose update presented by Sandy Hines and Gladys Sydock. If you would please come up to the table, that would be great.
Okay. So, good evening, members of council. It is a pleasure to be in this council chambers once again. And tonight I am joined by Douglas Sidock and Gladys Sidock. Doug is the chair and Gladys is the secretary of our Friends of the Caboose group. Thank you, Council, for your time this evening to hear this request from the Friends of the Caboose. Finally, it's time to celebrate with the community Phase 1 and 2 completion of the refurbishing of the caboose. Friends of the Caboose are requesting permission from Council to use Harmas Park and the Visitor Center October 14th, 2023 from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Setup would be from 8 to 10. The Caboose Day celebrations would be from 10 to 3, and then cleanup would take place from 3 to 4. Caboose Day will include a lot of fun activities in the park and a fundraising event in the Visitor Center. With Council's permission for the use of Harmas Park and the Visitor Center, we will be able to finalize the activities and the fundraising event. And then I look forward to returning to Council on September 12th, your meeting, to share with you and the community the full details of the day and to offer a formal invitation for all of you to attend Caboose Day in Renfrew, October 14th, 2023. I thank you, Council, for your consideration of this request. So we're looking for that permission to use the park and the Visitor Center in order that we can meet on later this week or early next week and finalize all our plans for that celebration, if we're granted permission.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Any quick questions from council about that? I know there'll be more information coming.
Yes.
Councillor Andrew Dick.
Thank you, Mayor Sidney. Through you. CO, this would be directed through you, Mayor, to CO Tremblay. Are we allowed to discuss this tonight and pass a motion so we can make this happen? Because it sounds like they're on a time crunch.
Yes, I think that's totally appropriate if there's a mover and seconder. And just noting that as part of the motion for the use of the VIC, there would be a fee waiver associated with it that staff would calculate, but for the use of the park and the VIC for that day. So if there's a motion that to the chair.
You beat me to it.
Okay. I'd like to make what you just said motion.
Okay. Second by Councillor Green. Any other questions?
Just I really like the look of the yellow.
Yes.
I'm glad you didn't go with red.
Yes.
All in favor of that motion? That motion's carried. Thank you. I will note that I did get to sit down with Sandy and Doug and Gladys about a month ago, and their plans are really cool, and I'm looking forward to it and got a better perspective of it. And I did joke that I do believe that Gladys and Doug Sidock's house is a monumental, I don't know what you'd call it, a museum of Renfrew heritage. It was pretty outstanding. So I look forward to this and look forward to more information on it and definitely be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you very much in your busy schedule for looking at that. So we'll get back to you, and I'll be in touch with the clerk and the CAO in regard to coming to the meeting in September and letting you know what's happening. All right.
And we appreciate your patience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving on to C3, Renfrew Hydro Inc. loan request. If we could have Lance and Steve. Turn it over. Lance, are you taking the lead on this?
Pardon me?
You're doing it? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we sent over a little PowerPoint, but if we can pull that up, that'd be appreciated. But first off, thank you very much. I know this was very short notice. Thank you, Rob. I think Steve reached out to you late last week, and to turn around that quickly, we're very appreciative. And just to set the stage here a little bit, as you can appreciate, running a hydro utility is a very capital-intensive business. We put a lot of expensive assets in the ground for 50 years. It's much like the town does with its water and sewer, and we need a little cash infusion to keep our system intact and working. So I'm going to talk a little bit why we're here. It's primarily due to our governance requirements in our unanimous shareholder agreement, which is sort of a direction for our board of directors. I'm going to go over sort of our 5-year capital plan at a very high level, but it's exactly what we submitted to the Ontario Energy Board. We're going through a rate application. And then I'm going to pass the baton over to Steve here, our Director of Finance, and he's going to take you through some of the financial aspects and some of the options that we considered. I will state that this is very normal, that the Ontario Energy Board actually expects a debt-to-equity structure in an LDC in the province of 60-40. That is 60% debt, 40% equity. We're actually opposite to that. Which isn't a terrible thing, but we've run out of cash to keep going on what this town needs in terms of infrastructure and reliability. So I'll take the next slide, please. So just a couple of snippets here. So I actually would like on record to state that I think at our next AGM we should revisit some of these numbers. I think they're probably 20 years old and a little stale, but that being said, they are what we're living with today. So we cannot borrow money from any institution in excess of $50,000 without getting the permission of the shareholder, which happens to be council. And we're also, if we're spending aggregates of $500,000 or $250,000 on any capital expenditure, we're supposed to seek the permission of our shareholder. And it's all obviously to reduce risk profile on the town. That being said, like some transformers cost $250,000. For example, just the transformer at Mattaway, the new one there, just to purchase it, that's not installation, that's just get it, is about $105,000. So we're not long eating up these numbers is what I'm saying. I'm not going to go into detail with this, but basically we're required to put together a distribution system plan. It's not a lot different of what you folks put together for water infrastructure plan, road plan. We do the same thing. You know, we do so by engaging our customers, and it's really we really manage assets, is it simply put, and it's really a combined asset management plan with the finances attached to it. It's expected the requirements of our distribution system driving Renfrew Hydro's capital investments will generally remain consistent. So we try to balance that so we don't get real lumpy. You know, we have a couple of lumps coming at us. One was a bucket truck that were purchased this year. So this is our basically 5-year capital plan that we submitted to as part of our DSP and as part of a rate application. And you can see we're planning on spending about, you know, $3,725,000 over the course of those 5 years. And we categorize our investments as access, renewal, system service, general plant. And basically those are, you know, system access is new customer growth, and if we're extending, there's capital contributions. You know, the developer will give us some funds towards that extension. System renewal is basically refurbishment, replacing aged assets and those in poor condition, or, you know, also replacing assets in emergency situations. System service is what we call enhancements. It's improvements, and probably the best example I can think of is automation. So if we automate some of our switches, we can put the power back on via computer opposed to actually rolling trucks. And Renfrew is benefiting the town. We are, as an LTC, we work very closely with Hydro One to automate all the town supplies from the grid, and that's why you notice when we do have a entire town interruption, the last year and a half, they've only lasted about 5 minutes because they're switching this from a control room in Barrie. Prior to that, they were rolling a truck from Cobden or Empire to get that back on. So major projects, and I notice I spelled Francis Street wrong. I apologize for that. But those are just, we typically do 3 to 4 large projects a year. These are, I just highlighted the biggest ones, and from 24 to 28. So we're working on Raglan Street South next year. You guys can see, I don't have to go through all these. Obviously, new servicing, we anticipate sometime, once the 4 lanes are complete, that there's going to be an uptick in some we hope some growth in both commercial, industrial, and subdivisions and housing. One of the biggest things we're doing is we're finishing off our substation feeder circuit protection upgrades. And the best way I could describe that is Renfrew, our existing protection on 2 substations, it's fuse protection. So many of you guys probably grew up where you had plug fuses in a panel. New panels are breakers. Well, basically that's what we're doing. We're automating this to a breaker system from a fuse system, and with that, we'll have the capability of adding bolt-on a SCADA system, which is really a control system where you can remote monitor, control, and operate at the feeder level. So that'll be a big plus for us, and most modern utilities in North America deploy this technology. We just haven't got the infrastructure yet, and we're doing it at a pace that we can afford. And just as a note, we haven't borrowed for we've been funding this for what, 20 years. It's just we can't keep funding that, and we just can't willy-nilly raise the rates this way either, right? So we're trying to protect our customers and keep our rates affordable. So I'm going to pass this over to Steve, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about finances.
Yeah, so thanks, Lance. At the moment, we're currently like about $250,000 in the negative. We do have a $500,000 line of credit that we are able to use, but in doing so, we're also asking RPG, our sister company, to not cash their check when they're supposed to. They're holding on for it for a couple of days while we generate our receipts from our customers. So our invoices went out about a week ago. We're generating receipts there, and in order to keep us within that $500,000 limit, we are asking RPG to hold off cashing their checks. So it's working for us all for now, but that honestly is we're paying for our power that we purchased from RPG from June with the money that we're receiving from our customers from their July usage. So we're a full month behind in the cycle. Power purchases is our biggest expense, about $1 million a month. So when you're in that cycle, it's hard to break out of it. And honestly, our cash flow issues relate to capital, but when you're investing in capital, you're basically getting your money from your customer over the next 45 years, not that year. So that's where we're going. So we have looked at a few options. If you want to go to the next slide, we have spoken to Infrastructure Ontario. I actually sat with Aaron Broom. We spoke on the phone with the regional manager. Because we don't have a history with them, it's likely going to be a 3 or 5 month process with no guarantee that the town doesn't have to sign off on it. And it would then affect the town's borrowing ability going forward and your credit. Local banks, I just spoke with Royal Bank earlier today. We've got rates from them. Good thing with them is because interest rates are high right now, we can do a longer amortization period without fixing into a rate for 10 years. Infrastructure Ontario and the equipment manufacturer is basically going to say, here's today's rate, you got to pay that for 10 years. So we have some flexibility with the bank. Again, the equipment manufacturer is going to be the most expensive. They're going to just charge local rates plus 1%. So just to be clear with you guys, I picked a few here. Not all utilities are the same, obviously. But in general practice, the industry expects you to fund your capital 40% through your own earnings and 60% through borrowing money. And like we had just said, the only money we've actually borrowed over the past 10 years is vehicle loans, and that's it. And we've got one coming here. Our current rate application basically says we should owe $5.3 million. And after this double bucket truck, we'll be at $3.5 million. So we've got $1.8 million of room, which is what the OEB expects. And one of the questions that was asked for us is, why aren't we borrowing more money? So there's reasons for that. I'm not going to get too far into details for that, but what we're looking at right now is a infusion of capital of about $1 million, which is basically 1 month power purchases, and it just gets us back to even, and will probably fund us for about 2.5 years.
So we're not 100% sure whether we got this resolution summarized correctly. It's not something we do very often, but we gave it a college best try at it. But essentially, we're looking for the shareholder to move forward and approve this. Obviously, the board will give the due diligence that they should as oversight and make sure that we're doing everything we can. It's sort of awkward asking your board before the board couldn't really approve this, let's put it that way, because of the governance rules. So that's it's sort of a chicken and an egg situation for us, but and that's why we asked to speak to you this evening.
Any questions, Councillor Legree?
Through you, Mayor Sidney. I guess I'm just curious, we just had the AGM like a couple of months ago, and none of this was brought up at the time, so I'm kind of wondering like why now, like what changed in the last month, 2 months, that because it's $1 million, right? So it's not just.
Yeah, it hasn't really changed. This is something we've been discussing at the board level. I think it's going through the rate application process, which we have a settlement conference next week, starting Tuesday. We see the interveners and the Ontario Energy Board pushing on this, right? So we were thinking of wrapping in the vehicle, but it really doesn't make sense. Like we're going to, we'll say, take the 1.7 million and fold it all into one, but the financing terms we just can't get, so we have to separate this. This has been a slowly eroding issue. We knew where it was going to come, we definitely were aware of this at at the AGM, because we discussed it at, our Q1 board meeting. So
Further to that, excuse me, further to that, there's been a few items that we've had to purchase because they were available. One of our projects for 2024 is the reclosures, and we are actually able to get our hands on a set, and they cost $160,000. We don't plan to put them in until 2024, but because they were available, we had to jump because items are becoming very scarce to find now.
Yeah, okay. I just, like, you just commented and said that you knew this was coming, so I just don't know why. Like, I don't know if I missed something at the AGM, but I think this should have been kind of brought up there and discussed, but we are where we are now, so that's my comment on it.
Councillor Andrew Dick.
Thank you, Mayor Sidney. I don't feel comfortable voting on this tonight. I don't know how, and I know that's probably not what you guys want to hear. I need some time. I need some time to digest this, research it, figure it out. But I can tell you, I 100% do not feel comfortable voting on this tonight. So I don't know what we could do, Mayor Sidney. Like, can we push it for 2 weeks? I don't know the answer. So I'll leave that in your hands.
Okay. CEO Tremblay, I think we can do a motion.
Yes, a motion to postpone to the next regular meeting of council, which I believe is September 12th. The other, in such direction, if council can ask staff to comment on impacts to our debt capacity, and if there'd be other ways of financing or providing this loan, including providing the cash and then charging back a rate. But looking at all options, but also the impact on the town's debt capacity. My understanding is through IO that it would have an impact, but the treasurer and the treasury team would review that and bring that forward as part of this motion for the shareholder to determine. And just in terms of just our ability to analyze what's proposed today, even though we've had initial conversations and have directed to contact IO just so that we, from a financial perspective, can have a review when this comes back in 2 weeks' time. 2 weeks' time, yes.
Councillor McWhorter?
Just to add to that, through you, Mayor. CEO Trombley, is it possible to get that review before we sit down rather than get it and have to read it a day or two before? It'd be nice to have it digest and maybe go back to Director Broom if we have any questions.
Yeah, so the agenda should be released the Thursday prior to the meeting, which should leave sufficient time ahead of the Tuesday. And if there's any questions in the meantime, if you'd like to send them to me and the finance team, we can then direct it to our friends at RHI so that they have an opportunity to provide any additional background, and we can attach it to the report as an FAQ or any items that have come up from council as you ponder this issue.
Yeah, this is very normal in our industry. I know it's not normal for Renfrew Hydro. We had some $2.7 million of cash reserves at one point that we've been utilizing to invest in our infrastructure. But this will be a normal process. Like, this will be every 3 to 4 years, probably 4 years. We'll be cycling through this. So. That's why I think it's worth, perhaps at the next AGM, looking at the governance structure and perhaps upping it slightly to reflect, the 2023 inflation factors since 2000.
Any other review?
Very quickly, I've committed to helping the CEO. We're aware of the Prince Edward County had a recent ruling from the tribunal. They had a corporation, and I don't know if it was a municipal services corporation or a corporation that they had 100% ownership in, want to take on debt, and Prince Edward County was worried about it impacting on their debt load, and so they went to the tribunal and successfully presented the case that it wouldn't impact on Prince Edward County's debt, the debt ratio report you get with the FIR at the end of the year, or in May of every year. And so I don't know that the hearing officer has given a written dissertation on that, so we're going to try and find that, and that may offer some guidance. I know there was a verbal dissertation at the hearing, and it was, I'm going to say, approximately 6 weeks ago, but I haven't found anything written, so I'm in the process of sending a note to their CAO, who I know, linking her up with Rob and asking for a favor. So we'll see what information we can get and include in the report. So there are some mechanisms there that, you know, hopefully will free us from the debt, but we'll see. And just a real quick comment, I recognize that the senior management team at Renfrew Hydro Inc., you know, with the hearings around rates, there are certain things that had to be kept under the blanket as they went to those hearings, and may not have, you know, in a timely manner been able to be shared because of the constraints of the calendar, and that's unfortunate. So I'm hopeful that there's mechanisms we can work out in the future for that. Just to your comments, Councillor Legree. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Sidney, through you. I'm not saying, like, I just need to absorb this. I would feel a lot more comfortable if Councillor Sobolski, Councillor McDonald, and Treasurer Broomer here. I just want to absorb it. I liked CEO Tremblay's. I am going to have some questions. I will forward them to him and Treasurer Broom. They can forward it to you. And yeah, I just don't want to make this decision tonight. Great report. Everything was great. Just there's some things I want to break through my brain. And then I'll be, in 2 weeks, I'll be ready to go. If that's okay with everybody, I would like to make that motion.
Completely understand, and don't, you can deal directly with us too if it helps. Like,
Okay.
you can pick up the phone and walk over to the office, whatever, talk to Steve, we can walk you through it.
Okay. Thank you.
CEO Tremblay?
That Renfrew Town Council postpone consideration of the shareholder motion with regard to RHI's request be postponed to the regular council meeting of September 12th, 2023, with staff providing a covering report.
Mover? Councillor Andrew Dick, seconder. Councillor Legree. Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Council. So they will be obviously in communication back and forth with you guys and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Announcements and community events. I have two. One, I just want to give an update to council on the community celebration day that was just happened on Saturday. Very well received, well attended. Over 150 people came to breakfast, raised over $1,200 for the Legion. Renfrew County Voices for People with Developmental Disabilities did a free barbecue. It was very well received as well. McGregor's donated the corn for the corn roast, and the food bank got almost $800 in donations. The tug of war wasn't as good as we were hoping it was going to be. We were sort of hoping the OPP would have showed up, but we will look into that. But the some Special Olympic athletes and some community members jumped on board to go against the fire department, and everybody loved it. And then kids got involved, and they did their own little one, so it was really good. Music was fantastic. So there's already plans in the works for next year. And just to remind everybody that tomorrow at 8 o'clock is the Remembrance Day commercial being shot down here at Low Square. The roads will be closed till approximately 9:30. If anybody does want to come and be part of the audience or part of the fill-in, please remember that you have to dress as if it's November the 11th. Do not show up in shorts and flip-flops because the commercial is there the week before Remembrance Day, so it might be a hot morning, but please dress accordingly. But it is a national commercial that is being shot, so that's very good for Renfrew. I was wondering that too. I'm not sure if they're going to be giving them out. I haven't heard from the Legion, but that was one of my concerns as well. Councilor McWhirter?
What time should we be at the Square?
It starts at 8, so there is a parade, so I'm assuming the parade starts at 8. So if we're just down there, just filling in holes to have people there.
I won't be able to make it. I have county council that starts at 9, so by the time I get to Pembroke, it'll be 9.
Well, it's a slow day for you tomorrow anyway.
What's that?
It's a slow day for you tomorrow anyway.
Yeah, it is a very slow day tomorrow, 9 to 5.
Any other questions? That's it. All right. Moving on to reports arising from committee. Going down to Corporate Services and Economic Development, D51 Craft Beer Festival 2023 liquor license application. And there is a motion. That Renfrew Town Council recognizes the Renfrew Craft Beer and Food Truck Festival as a municipal significant event. And I will, can I have a mover, please? Councilor McQuarrie, second by Revimo. I will turn it over to our clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to give a brief overview for council since this report did not go to committee just due to timing constraints. This is a typical report we bring forth as part, so the Craft Beer Festival, for anyone who is unaware, it takes place in October on an annual basis, and it's going to take place in October this year. Staff is still working to finalize the date, and we will release that to the public very shortly. However, in the interim, staff is working on some administrative matters, which of course include an application to the AGCO for a special occasion permit, as there will be alcohol served in a public setting. We've done this successfully every year since 2016. Essentially, what we have to do is get council to deem the event a significant event as a component to our application. The application costs $300 and it's budgeted for and is paid from the craft beer operating budget. And if there's any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Any questions from council? Hearing none. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, council. Moving on to F. That Renfrew Town Council confirmed the regular minutes of council dated August 8th, 2023, and the closed session minutes of regular meeting on August 8th, 2023, understanding they remain confidential. Mover, please. Councillor Andrew Dick, second by Councillor Legree. Any questions about the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor? Thank you. That is carried. There is no notice of which has been previously given. Motions requires, but none of that. Notice of motions? No. Oh, you do? Okay. Sorry, didn't know that. Councillor Gray.
Through you, Mayor Sidney, I have a notice of motion from Councillor McDonald that can't attend tonight. And it is, I'd like to bring forth a notice of motion for the town of Renfrew to produce an action plan that addresses sidewalk repair within the town of Renfrew.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Revimo?
There's no discussion on it until it actually comes to the meeting in terms of an amendment or anything. Perfect. Okay, good. Thanks. I'll think of one.
My understanding, just for clarity, my apologies if I didn't mention to anybody, I believe the intention of the person giving notice is asking staff to prepare kind of an outline and to report back on how we approach cement sidewalk repair and maintenance. And just the good councillor provided the notes on his behalf, but just in my conversations with it, just for clarity in terms of the scope of what the councillor is seeking, which will come back at the next meeting.
Great. And we're not going into closed, so L, bylaws. The bylaw listed on agenda of August 29, 2023 be taken as read and passed. 70-2023 confirming. Mover, please. Councillor McQuarrie, seconded by Revimo. Any questions? All in favor? That motion's carried. Upcoming events or council meetings. Regular council meeting September 12th, 6 o'clock. Fire, Recreation, and Community Services Standing Committee August 31st at 10 a.m. Infrastructure, Public Works, and Asset Management Standing Committee September 5th, 10 a.m. Planning, Building, and Environment Standing Committee September 5th, 2 p.m. And Corporate Services of Economic Development Standing Committee September 19th at 10 a.m. All which will be in person or Zoomed and put live on YouTube and recorded. And with that, we are adjourned at 7:27. Thank you, council and staff.